everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Happy Tuesday. I hope your guys' week is off to a good start. I'm here all morning basically. I'm not even filming this on Tuesday. We're not even close to the transit yet and I'm already feeling this. So I feel like this whole process of me even making this Sun Square Saturn video is very Sun Square Saturn. So I'm going to talk to you guys why things feel a little heavy, they feel a little sluggish. Outside of the grand, fixed stuff that's going on, we have a mutable square that's going to be setting up over the next week. And I want to talk to you guys about what it means. I pulled some tarot cards and I also have some insight as to how this has played out in the past and lots of good just things to kind of mull over in today's lecture. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm a Western astrologer. I work with the Sabian Symbols along with the art of tarot to better understand what's going on out in the cosmos. If you like my content, make sure you click the button below, make sure you're subscribed, give me a thumbs up, and leave me a comment below. Any interaction with the channel is super helpful, even if it's just a thumbs up or dropping in to let me know that it's your first time. I do read everybody's comments. I don't always get a chance to respond, but thank you guys so much. We're so close. We're about a little bit more than 1,000 subscribers away to hitting my goal of 20,000 subscribers. Some of you guys have been watching me since back in the day when I was with Astrology, and some of you guys have been watching me since I started my own channel back in I think 2017, 2018. Took a bit of a hiatus, but we've come back in recent years and we've seen so much growth. So big thank you to all of you guys who like, comment, share, and subscribe, and also who have joined my memberships. I appreciate you guys so much. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Most of you guys are waking up this morning and at least we've got the moon in conjunction to Venus. Things are nice and sweet this morning, but we're starting to feel the square that's building between now the sun in Gemini, now we're in Gemini season, coming into a square with Saturn in Pisces. So specifically, you guys are going to see this really kind of play out May the 26th through the 28th. It will be squaring at 6 degrees. So let me pull that up so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. All right. And I work with about a 2 or 3 degree orb. So you guys who are astrologically sensitive, you may be already feeling that. And specifically, the mutable signs, you guys are really going to be the ones who are going to be feeling this. If you have any personal planets, let's say between 5 and 7 degrees of the mutable signs, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius, you're definitely going to feel the square. Now, if you're somebody who likes to track the moon and you've been tracking the moon since we've had Saturn's ingress into Pisces, you know that every couple of days we're going to see the moon go through one of the mutable signs and it's going to square or oppose or conjunct Saturn. This is actually going to be the first Sun Square Saturn that we've seen since Saturn's ingress into Pisces this year. And we call this an opening square. Okay, so this is the opening square. This is really similar to the first quarter square in a lunar cycle, which represents opening challenges and the hurdles that we have to kind of work through to be able to get to that full moon phase where there is going to be some kind of polarity that comes up. You guys will see that more in Virgo season when the sun opposes Saturn. But for right now, just know that this is an opening square. And being that it's in immutable signs, it's going to be all about changes, right? Something I've observed with the moon over the last few months and weeks since we've had Saturn go into Pisces, when I have observed the moon going through Gemini or Virgo or Sag and it makes these aspects to Saturn, there's always a sense of needing to reflect. Okay, so if there's anything that you take away from this video, stop, reevaluate, take time to reflect. That's the number one thing that you want to do as you experience some of the challenges of this particular transit. Even though it's going to last only a few days, this is time to really think about how we're doing our Saturn work. Okay, so the sun moves a lot faster than Saturn. Obviously, it's changing degrees roughly every other day. And watching the sun come into conjunction with Saturn is going to represent some sense of a clash between the archetype of the hero, right, the sun, which is about shining a light on something and action and desire. And in the sign of Gemini, it's about moving around, communicating and sharing. And then we have Saturn, which wants kind of restriction and limitation, and it wants you to have form, but it's hard to find form when Saturn is in Pisces. So there's a clash with a square between these two particular archetypes. Now, something else I just want to note that I have also seen a lot of with these particular squares in general, right, throughout transits, just generally speaking, I've seen a lot of double standards. And I think that we're dealing with double-bodied signs, right? Gemini and Pisces are known to have kind of two oscillating kind of energies. I've seen a lot of contradictions, a lot of confusion, manipulation of facts, data, and false representation of things. Whether it's something you read on the internet, if it's an edited video, if it's something you hear on the news, if it's some kind of bit of gossip that comes your way, we cannot trust everything, and we really need to use our third eye and common sense when it comes to really deciphering some of the stuff that's going to be coming out. Now, what's also interesting to me is that when this happens, we have the dispositor both of the Sun, Mercury, and the dispositor of Saturn, Jupiter, both in the sign of Taurus. Okay, so this is where people always ask, like, how do you see this and how do you see that? You have to look more than just at the planets in the houses or in particular signs. You have to see what else is kind of coming through, their connections to where their ruling planets or dispositors are. So recently we've seen Mercury just go direct in the sign of Taurus. So hopefully we're going to get some kind of clarity about this looming, global issue in regards to finances, banking situations. But I think it's had a lot of people really reevaluating their own personal resources, their own security, their own values, their own needs, also really kind of getting back in the body and touching on issues revolving around self-esteem. That's been a big theme. So to see now Mercury direct, and to also see that in close proximity to Uranus, which is shocking, and Jupiter, which makes things bigger. It's fair to say that so much of the Sun square Saturn, I do think, is going to be more about these issues pertaining to Mercury's most recent retrograde. How some of the information that's just now starting to kind of come out into the media that's been held back during the retrograde is going to be falsely represented, it's going to be manipulated, or you're going to see stuff that's going to kind of get snuck in that you could miss if you're not listening or paying attention, right? So just food for thought. I do think a lot of it's going to be connected to some of the same themes revolving around the financial world. Also, I think about the fact that, both of these planets, Mercury and Jupiter, Jupiter's the traditional ruler associated with Pisces, are 12 signs from the Sun, okay? So it's kind of similar as if you're a Gemini rising, your 12th house, right? It's subconscious, you can't see it, it's happening when you're sleeping. It's something that's kind of hidden from you. You have to go looking for it because it's missing. So to have Mercury, the messenger, right, in an earth sign, it's about physical information, physical documents, things coming to light, and Jupiter, which makes things bigger, and Jupiter is also going to be about rules. Jupiter is going to be about global trends, sitting behind the Sun. You're going to start hearing more in the media, in the news about, well, there's issues with cash, but that's okay because we're going cashless anyway. Something that caught my eye earlier today as I was putting together this lecture was just something that was circulating on the news that was like talking about reverse ATMs, and now they're putting all kinds of reverse ATMs places where if you happen to go to like a sporting event, or if you go somewhere where there's like a concert, or it's no cash, it's card only, they're having reverse ATMs where you can put cash into the ATM and it's going to spit out a debit card. So that way you can go and use it at the event. So this reminds me of that, especially because Mercury is going to be about what's an exchange. And Jupiter can also be about new patterns and trends that are coming globally. And I think we're going to hear more about this push. And now that we don't have like a COVID narrative to fall back on, we're going to hear more about, well, it's more convenient and it's going to be more friendly. And I think it's kind of like I think they're trying to outlaw cash, as crazy as it sounds. But I'm curious to see how it plays out. Number two, I also want you guys to pay attention because very soon we're going to see Mercury come into alignment with Uranus. Now this will be after the square, okay? That's going to be taking place on June the 4th, but still it's going to be just shortly after we have the Sun square Saturn, where maybe we're hearing for specific reasons. There has been delays, limitations, things being held back for whatever reason, and then as soon as Mercury and Uranus align closer to the beginning of June, some of this shocking information is going to kind of make headlines out in the world. We might hear also more about cryptocurrency. You're probably going to hear more about electrical things and things pertaining to the environment, and also like transactions. But Mercury has been held back from that conjunction to Uranus, and now Uranus is moving into a new decan. It's actually sitting in a new degree. It's about to go from 19 to 20 degrees. So it's about to hit that third decan, which is going to deal more with, Saturn. It's about new rules and regulations and limitations. So some of this might be shocking and surprising to some of us. Some of us are going to be kind of ushered into this new phase with some of these themes out in the world, and how it's impacting how we're traveling, what we're buying, where we're going, what we're experiencing, and all of that fun stuff. So you guys will start to see how that's kind of showing through the skies the next week or two. When we look back also on when this cycle was first seeded, I take you guys back to February 16th, 2023. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I just feel like it's like crazy how fast this year has gone. Maybe it's just the part of getting older, but it seems like on one hand that was just yesterday, and on the other hand it seems like it was like years ago. But just a few short months ago, that's when we had the Sun-Saturn conjunction, which was seeded. Okay, so basically the Sun and Saturn aligned, representing a new sense of sacrifice, commitment, and goals. Saturn can be about that, but the Sun-Saturn is about kind of maturing, growing up, becoming aware of what we need to do. And if you look back on the events that were going on right around, like, let's say the 14th, maybe through, the 17th, the 18th of February, as that Sun-Saturn alignment happened, you have to look at where Aquarius was in your chart. There was something that was sacrificed or committed to, or you got serious about a goal. And this is like the first check to that goal. Okay, so that's how I want you to look at it. It's not an exact square, but that was the last time that we saw the conjunction take place. Okay. All right, so that was in Aquarius. And now we have the square that's coming in. Take this back a little bit. Went a little too far. There we go. And now we've got the square that's going to be coming in, and that's going to be at 6 degrees. I want to read to you guys the Sabian symbols for 6 degrees of Saturn and 6 degrees of Gemini. And it's going to be hard not to feel this ingress, guys, because look at when the ingress happens. You're going to have the moon, Saturn, and the sun all hit 6. Okay, so we know with the Sabian symbols we round up, so I'm going to be reading 7 because it's not exactly 6 degrees. But something about these two Sabian symbols are going to be kind of challenging one another, right? And because the sun is moving faster, the sun is what's actually squaring Saturn. So if you have this book, we're going to be reading Gemini 7, page 98, an old-fashioned well. The theme is regeneration. The symbol speaks to self-renewal and to the organic integrity, or the fact that each individual retains his own unique identity. No matter how many times and ways he enters into relationships with others, the reality is into their own. The image of an old-fashioned well symbolizes the source of all life, and it emphasizes regeneration, nourishment, and revitalization. Implicit in this symbol is the suggestion that man must give of himself in order to renew or refresh himself. The individuals who try to keep the status quo or resist change eventually stagnate or run dry. At its highest, the symbol represents inner strength, resourcefulness, wisdom to know when to go with the flow. Watch for inadequacy, indifference, or impassiveness. The accent is on revitalization and sustainment. Your greatest advantage lies in taking the time to fill your own well and to take care of your own needs and do something for yourself today. Guard against losing touch with what sustains you. Avoid giving too much. Stepping stones would be source of life, purity, renewal, depth, regeneration, nourishment, compensation, and sustainment. Okay, so basically we've got the sun, right? This is the challenge, I think, is to do these things. You know, sixes do relate to health. I'm going to read you Nicola's book in a second, but sixes do relate to health, but also about schedule and routine, right? Just me personally, you know, I intentionally went and planned a trip revolving around this square. Because for me, a lot of it was going to be, are you going to go deeper into the 9th house and challenge Saturn in the 6th house of your daily grind and routine? It was my willingness to be like, yeah, I'm going to go and do that thing, even though I know I have a lot of work to do. So for some of us, squares can represent the sense of feeling like we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. And so I want you guys to lean more into Gemini. That's why I read Gemini first. But here's what you're going to be challenged by, okay? So we've got Saturn at 6 degrees and change, which is going to be Sabian Symbols 7. Pisces 7, a cross lying on the rocks. The keyword is conscience. The theme is slippage. The symbol speaks for fear of personal rejection and blindly following the crowd in order to gain acceptance. The image of a cross lying on the rocks alludes to dislocation, disillusionment, and loss of faith, the abandonment of spiritual values. The emphasis is the degree of importance on being true to the self, listening to the voice of consciousness, thinking independently, and standing up for what is believed in, even when it isn't popular. At its highest, the symbol represents moral integrity, courage, and refusal to compromise the self or lower personal standards in order to please others. Watch for spinelessness, giving in to the demands of others, or a tendency to be easily intimidated. The accent is on letting your conscience be your guide. You could easily decide to make a clean break or sever ties in some sort. Your greatest advantage lies in refusing to compromise your integrity, release whatever has been brought, no welcoming response. Guard against hanging on to what might be detrimental to your own best in the foolish of something better than nothing, and no one can do the job as well as I can. Don't be afraid to let go and let God. Stepping stones would be abandonment, withdrawal, retraction, neglect, denial, disapproval, nullification, objection, protest. Okay. So the question is that if we know with Saturn and Pisces, we are supposed to be, just generally with this degree, letting go of things that we may feel like we have to let go of, you know, listening to our higher selves, thinking independently, being in our integrity. I told you guys this is going to be a big theme with Saturn and Pisces. And then the challenge to Gemini 7, guard against losing in touch what sustains you. I think there's going to be this theme revolving around, you know, like money, like who's paying the bills. And I hate to keep like bringing this up, but there's going to be a lot of like, what do I say or not say or do not do because I don't want to rock the boat, right? I don't want to put off somebody I might be doing business with, or I don't want to, you know, clip that relationship short with a relative because they're helping me, but I really don't see eye to eye with them. Or an employer that, you know, cuts your paychecks, but you may not necessarily feel like they're, you know, bringing a lot to the table, or they may be doing some undesirable things. There's going to be some clash here, okay? And you guys are going to see what I'm talking about when I give you some of the themes for this next week. Let's see what Nicola has to say about 6 degrees. And I'll read you guys just like a master list of some stuff. It sounds like word vomit, but it's really just a bunch of keywords that get kicked up whenever you see planets hitting specific signs. And in Nicola's method of the numerology being connected to the astrology, 6 degrees is a Virgo degree, which is going to bring up working, workspace, work offices, workshops, working conditions, hardworking employees, health, illness, general practitioners, everything associated with health, medical or cures, prescriptions, macrobiotics, the service industry, customers, clients, those who request things, people who are renting or renters, vet science, domestic animals, pets, analysis, step parents, clothes or a place where we keep our clothes, aunts, uncles, stomach, honey, bees, beehives, and ants. Okay, so there's some random stuff here, but keepers, caretakers, very much like, of animals or of people. Sometimes it's very like Virgo 6th house. But I get the impression the fact that the moon is going to be in Virgo and it's opposing Saturn, I think we're going to hear some kind of information coming out that is going to be perhaps challenging the status quo or the narrative, or, talking heads and people who have opinions out in the media revolving around work, getting back to work, how we get people to get their jobs back, how we get people to be feeling better enough about going back into the world. More talk about these changes with people, going back to work completely or not at all. I think we're going to hear all kinds of input on that. When I was taking a look at the last couple times that we had the Sun in Gemini square Saturn, I decided really only to stick with the most recent. So obviously we know Saturn goes through a sign about every 29, 30 years. So we haven't seen Saturn in Pisces since the early 90s. And I was looking back at May and June of 1994. That was one of the more recent times. Saturn had several squares, but I wanted to look at this year in particular because it had some of the most interesting stuff that kind of came up. So as I was observing May and June of 1994, the last time we saw some squares between Saturn and the Sun, there was about 2.5 year period that we had this. A number of things happened. So for starters, keep in mind that as the Sun's going through Gemini, it's going to be highlighting television, TV, news networks, podcasters, radio hosts, right? We didn't have podcasts in the 90s. We had radio hosts. So those of you guys who are big into podcasting, but you're younger, this is what we would do. We'd listen to the radio or we'd watch people on TV. And then we also had Saturn, which could have been about older generations, people closing things out, right? Because as the Sun is rising out of the square, there's like something new that's being born. So one theme that I saw was like people that were retiring and new talent coming in, or leaders that were retiring and new leaders were coming in. So that's like a theme with Sun square Saturn. But specifically in 1994, Larry King retires. Okay, so he actually had his last one of his last radio shows during this time. Huge person who had done it for I don't even know how long, but was on the airwaves forever doing his TV show and his interviews. We saw the Star Trek finale, which totally makes sense with Saturn being in Pisces, like that, the final frontier. But the Sun square Saturn could be literally that last chapter and an end of a series. But at the same time, we saw FX network premiere. They came on board. Howard Stern comes and premieres with his television show on E! And Pulp Fiction won a major award at the Cannes Film Festival. Obviously, for many of you guys who are like film buffs, just like an amazing piece of work that was put out there that in many ways like sent shockwaves through like the film industry. So new people emerging and others, kind of retiring. And that may be the theme between the younger king that's got all of the energy and the vitality, the Sun, and Saturn in Pisces, which is coming to the end of a cycle. Something else I noticed that was a really big theme was a number of new changes with people in charge, specifically presidents or prime ministers. And during this particular 2-month period, we saw new presidents for South Africa, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. So it's interesting to see that happen. I saw a lot of stuff on sports, obviously, but this was big because this is when Nelson Mandela moved in and became, president during this time. And so if you guys know his story about, being like a prisoner of war and like now that moment where he's like coming in and, being able to be recognized as somebody who's really significant in ruling, very Sun square Saturn. And then another theme that I noticed also, and this was big. I remember this. I was about 5 or 6 years old, but I remember this happening. This is when O.J. Simpson had his infamous Bronco chase. So obviously Gemini can be associated not just with media, but getting around, moving, driving, and then the square to Saturn, which can be about hidden hidden crimes and potentially jail time and other things that are kind of like secret and kind of swept up. Within this 2-month period, we saw OJ have his car chase, which led to his arrest because he refused to turn himself in. And then the beginning of the pre-trials began. And so if you remember, if you were around in the early 90s, you just remember being just an insane thing. It was just all over the news. They were having all kinds of live, viewings of the courtroom hearings. And this is when all of that kind of began. So I'll talk a little bit today about why the Sun square Saturn can be a little bit of like getting checked by Saturn. There is a sense of having challenges with authority figures, and also very harsh criticism can come up during this transit. And then finally, the U.S. Ice Skating Federation bars Tonya Harding for life. Okay, so very Sun square Saturn, the repercussions of of bad behavior and things that kind of went on that were not exactly kosher. So we've got in January of 1994, Harding became embroiled in a controversy with her ex-husband Jeff, where they orchestrated an attack on her fellow U.S. skating rival Nancy Kerrigan. So if you guys are familiar with that story, some of you guys might be too young, but yeah, she ultimately in 1994 in March ended up accepting a plea bargain where she pleaded guilty to conspiracy to hinder prosecution. So that ended up being like a really big thing in the ice skating world, but very much about like enemies and combativeness. That's definitely seen with the Mars tension that you see with the square. Okay, and how it just all comes out, how the secrets or the subconscious or things that are kind of hidden in the shadows come through the media. And then finally, one of the other things that I noticed, and this does take the theme, I think, of not just the sun, but also Mars, record heat waves and temperatures were going on at that time. And so at the time we were watching Mars coming into, I believe, conjunction with like the South Node, but we were going to start seeing some Mars-Pluto oppositions. And yeah, there was record heat. And we know that the sun is hot and dry and Saturn is cold and dry. So it's not unusual that when we see, heat and pressure and other things come together in certain environments, there can be record, heat temperatures, and we can also see storms. And so something else I was kind of thinking about is like, what's going to happen here having, the sun in an air sign and Saturn in Pisces? Is it going to produce that? Well, something you will see with Mars and Leo, we are, I think, going to have increased temperatures. With Mars and Leo, we generally do see sometimes like forest fires or, significant fires somewhere in the news. Recently, it's been more about earthquakes and volcanoes, and I think that's been about the Mars, square Jupiter personally, but it would not surprise me if we see some really extreme weather. And it's not unusual when we see squares between the mutable signs that we see some extreme weather, coastal storms, and we see pressure buildup and tornadoes and other things. And I know we're coming into the season for that in certain parts of the world. So just be mindful, especially with this day when the moon squares the sun and also Saturn. There is likely going to be something like this that we're going to hear. But specifically the Sun square Saturn transit, we're going to see this twice a year. So we have the square, then we'll have the opposition, and then in Sagittarius season, we're going to have the final square. And I think this is important to watch because this is the first opening square, like I said, that we've had since Saturn moved into Pisces. And with that sun moving through Gemini, forming the square, I think it creates a dynamic energy. It can be very challenging. It can be very confusing. Squares obviously bring tension, but they also bring obstacles, and it requires our need to really pay attention and create some sense of like an adjustment. So being that Gemini is airy and intellectual, it's associated with communication, curiosity, and learning. The Sun square Saturn, I think, is bringing up issues revolving around our core identity, vitality, and self-expression. As it moves through Gemini, it's going to put an emphasis on gathering information, exchanging ideas, and engaging in social interactions. But then Saturn's going to come in and kind of throw on the handbrake because Saturn, on the other hand, is a planet that's about structure and discipline and responsibility and limitations. Pisces is watery, sensitive. It's connected to the imagination, compassion, intuition. So with Saturn in Pisces, it's encouraging us to confront our emotional boundaries, face reality, and take responsibility for our dreams and visions. With this square, I'm wondering if there's going to be themes revolving around censorship of what people can and cannot say, of what they can and cannot post, especially with that 6 degrees pertaining to information, statistics, things that can be analyzed, stuff in regards to health or wellness or pharmaceuticals. I do think that that is very possible. And when the sun in Gemini comes into a square with Saturn and Pisces, likely there's going to be a clash between free-flowing communicative energy of Gemini and more restrictive, serious nature of Saturn. So it's going to bring challenges to self-expression, challenges to communication, decision-making, but more importantly, I think goal setting. It's going to feel a little heavier, more challenging to kind of get through things and stay optimistic. Many of us can feel limited, blocked, criticized for expressing ourselves. And also the sense of like pursuing our intellectual pursuits. There's going to be a sense of people wanting to shut things down or criticize things. So if you feel like people are being more critical or more judgmental, it's in the skies. I also think that it's not unusual when we see some of these squares, specifically within Gemini and Pisces, where there is definitely discrimination. We can see racial discrimination. We can also see, religious discrimination. So just know that there are going to be more sensitive topics that are kind of coming up where people are going to be challenging some of this. Obviously, Saturn being in Pisces is going to be touching on borders and immigration and where people can and cannot travel to and what is being shown in regards to immigration and borders. We might hear about this specifically also around coastal cities. So I don't think it's going to be limited purely to just, the hot topic of the issue on the southern border here in the United States, but I think we're going to hear about this more globally and internationally. Some of you guys are going to find it difficult to articulate your thoughts effectively, or you're going to face obstacles when trying to engage in conversations or like negotiating with people. There can be a tendency with the Sun square Saturn to doubt yourself or feel insecure about your abilities and your knowledge. The transit can also highlight any existing conflicts between your logical mind and your intuition and your desire for intellectual exploration and your need for emotional fulfillment, because we've got the Sun highlighting that intellectual side of Gemini that's curious and wants to share and wants to kind of put that information out there. But it's getting checked by Saturn that's going to be bringing up that doubt. Just on a personal level, 2 things. One is I had transit Saturn square my Sun all like last year. It was kind of going on and off for about 1.5 years. And it was a little different because I had a Uranus opposition. But for me, it was like oh, do I say this? Oh, do I say this? And I constantly found myself being like, do I speak out against this thing? Do I talk about this thing? And it was this kind of back and forth where I was questioning whether or not like what was too much. There was also a lot of me questioning, realistically what I could create and whether or not people were going to be receptive to my creative process, and if I was going to branch out and do other things outside of just my, usual sessions. I think a lot of it was also challenging myself creatively to see what else I could put together. Something that kind of came of that during that Saturn square was like me creating and putting together a calendar. So I was very much dealing with like the Saturn archetype of time and making sure everything was like perfect and put together in the appropriate way. And then the Sun being that creative expression and like really learning how to integrate and find that there needed to be systems and everything needed to be like exact and perfect. And I needed a lot of focus and determination to like really see that project done. But at the end of a Sun square Saturn transit, generally what you see is that there is some new kind of mature, definitive sense of self-expression. So if you're having transit Saturn square your Sun, if you happen to be a mutable sign Sun like Gemini, Virgo, or Sag, this conversation will really benefit you. It's like my way of saying like keep going, like when things get tough, just keep going. And be mindful that you're going to get some criticism, but it's going to be about what you do with that criticism. For the rest of us who may not have planets in mutable signs, we're still going to see some sense of challenges and upheaval and having a difficult time sometimes meeting timelines or deadlines during this several-day period. However, despite the potential challenges, the transit makes an awesome opportunity for growth and self-improvement. And so that's what I really liked about the Sun square Saturn transit myself. I found that it was encouraging me to find a balance between my intellectual and my emotional needs and integrating more of my logical thinking and also my intuition. Definitely, this is a transit that calls for patience, perseverance, and discipline in overcoming obstacles to achieve your goals. And my recommendation is to really pay attention to your communication style and be mindful of your words and to avoid being overly critical or harsh with other people. Do take responsibility for your thoughts and actions. This is going to be essential because that's about, Saturn is about kind of showing up, right? And when we're dealing with these squares that are immutable signs, we're learning how to change. And I think that Saturn can hold us accountable for some of the things that we're saying or writing or posting. And there can be some concerns about speaking out and saying some things clearly because it really resonates with the Sabian symbol for Pisces 6. Something else that's been coming up for me a lot is just because I could doesn't mean I should, right? And maybe you resonate with that. Let me know. There's been like this sense of me looking at this building square being like, is it worth giving somebody a piece of your mind? Is it worth saying something? Not everybody is in a position of being or willing or open enough to be able to hear what you're trying to tell them. So for some of us, it can feel like we're just kind of banging our head against a wall because somebody's not really getting the message. But at what point do we take a step back and go like, whoa, I'm not their teacher, right? It's not my responsibility. And you don't necessarily need to cast, pearls before swine, because there are going to be some people who won't be able to absorb the knowledge and the information that you're trying to give them, or the lessons that you're trying to kind of bestow in front of them. So some themes that I would say just to watch for very generally: authority and limitations. Okay, number one, this is something you're going to see because that's what Saturn does, and the sun is getting checked. So I want you to think of this few day period of as a bit of a speed bump or a stop sign, right? It's not a full stop, but we have to really slow down and take a look at what we're doing and what direction we're going in. So you want to look at your chart and look at where Gemini is. The sun's moving through there, bringing lots of action, and it's challenging Saturn in Pisces. Okay, so look for where that square is taking place. You're going to possibly experience some obstacles and some resistance, right? But you have to just keep on moving through that. It's normal and natural for self-doubt and insecurity to pop up during the Sun square Saturn. So the key is to not let that get you down, to see this as an opportunity to rework something, to build on your self-confidence and overcome self-imposed limitation. Accountability and responsibility are the key words here. There is a need to take responsibility and be accountable for our actions, our choices, and our commitments. And some of us are going to have to make some tough choices and some sacrifices in order to really practice better discipline. Structure kind of goes hand in hand with that because Saturn represents structure and discipline, and the square represents a need for better order and organization. So the transit may encourage us to establish routines, set goals, and follow a much more disciplined approach to life. Specifically for me, it's about me creating a to-do list and being better about kind of crossing that to-do list off and giving myself goals that I want to be able to accomplish things. That's been working for me, but I have Saturn right now in my 6th house, so that's the best way for me to get it done. For you, it might be different. So it's a matter of really understanding where these particular squares are taking place. For some people, it will literally materialize as learning how to speak less and listen more, right? Because Saturn says, hold on, I've got something to tell you, but if you're talking and you're not listening, you're not going to catch that. Choosing to spend 15 minutes starting your day meditating. Choosing to spend 15 minutes starting your day journaling and reflecting before you do anything else. Like really being able to do that kind of mind dump. Kind of reminds me of like the artist's way when you do your morning pages. And really getting up and getting everything out and like reflecting before you kind of get on with the creative process. That might be beneficial for some people if you guys want to check that book out. Speaking less and listening more, though, that's something that really comes through for me with Sun and Gemini square Saturn. And also just patience, right? Because there's going to be challenges and there's going to be obstacles. And for me, something that I kept saying to myself over and over when I had the Sun square Saturn is I was like, okay, back to the drawing board. I found myself saying that all the time because it was my way of like not giving up and throwing in the towel when I got frustrated. It was my way of being like, this isn't working. I literally have to go and work this out. And I quite literally had a dry erase board with markers, and I would write stuff out and organize things and put together projects and discussions. And I needed to do that because I'm more visual, but literally back to the drawing board, right? Because that's what this is having to kind of find a solution to a problem. It's going to teach us patience and the importance of patience and perseverance, and reminds us that success often requires sustained effort and the ability to overcome setbacks and delays. In the day and age where we can have immediate, just anything immediately, whether it's food or, somebody will swipe on Tinder or, a response, and we get that dopamine off of like an Instagram hit. This is going to teach people that you have to work for it. And so that's what I love actually about the fact that we saw like Howard Stern, come in during this time, love him or hate him. He ended up being somebody who was very controversial and really kind of challenged the status quo of what it meant to be like a on-air radio host, right? And I think we're going to see some people kind of go up against and challenge the status quo when it comes to speaking out, and the media throughout these transits as well. And then finally, ambition, achievement. I think that, challenge does push us to want to achieve more. There's this desire for achievement and wanting to be heard. And it's going to give us the opportunity to clarify our goals and develop a practical plan of action, rather than just kind of assuming that everything's going to work out and expecting it and feeling that it's just going to show up. It's really teaching us, no, you have to develop a plan of action if you want to see things come together. And this is about getting the mind on board with what the vision is, right? Because there can be some scatteredness that can kind of be going down with this square if we don't have clarity and if we don't have a process. And also I think Saturn's always going to want to teach us important lessons about growth and challenges. And Saturn in Pisces is all about self-reflection, introspection, deeper understanding, taking that time to really kind of tap into our own strengths and weaknesses. So I'm hoping that this encourages you guys to see the positive or the silver lining, right? Oftentimes people always ask me, oh, this is a difficult transit, how bad is it going to be? And I always tell them, well, it's going to be what you make of it. It's how you approach it. Yeah, the Sun-Saturn square, especially, in transit, if you're experiencing that, is not the easiest, because it can represent a period of time where your ego is kind of taking a hit. But if you work through those issues, you'll realize that there's some kind of gold at the end, of the tunnel. Something that comes up for me a lot also is just like the fact that Saturn generally does not deny, he just delays. So if you keep trying at something, eventually you're going to see that around the time of the Saturn trine or the Saturn conjunction to the Sun within about a year, you're going to have the opportunity to be able to see that thing come to fruition. It's all about knowledge and awareness, educating yourself about this aspect, the ability also to set realistic goals. For some of us, Sun in Gemini is literally how much we're scrolling, how much time we're on social media. The square to Saturn is, how much screen time we're getting in and if we're limiting things. We're hearing about certain states that are banning like TikTok and social media for kids. I think that's part of this Sun square Saturn that's setting up. On a personal level, I'm looking at things going like, okay, how much time am I actually spending? I've gone and turned on my notifications to let me know how much time I'm spending on my phone, how much time I'm spending on my tablet. So that way I can look at that and go, okay, like self-punishment, how much time did you spend doing that when you could have been doing X, Y, and Z? And I'm trying to get an accurate number of, minutes or hours or whatever that I'm spending, so I can rededicate some of that time and start structuring out my schedule going, instead of scrolling for 20 minutes, I'm going to make sure that I read 20 pages of books. And I've actually set aside books that I want to actually work through that I haven't gotten a chance to finish. So that's something you can steal from my toolbox if you want. I'll share that with you. I think also it's important to develop a support system. So cultivating a network of supportive friends, family, and mentors that can provide guidance and encouragement during challenging times. Seek out individuals that have experienced overcome similar challenges. So speaking with like-minded friends, mentors, therapists, parents, elders, people who can give you some solid feedback and some guidance. It can be really helpful during this time. And just practice getting in touch with your inner guidance. That's the best advice I can give you guys. In closing, I want to let you know that I did ask the cards about what we were going to learn about this transit, and the cards that I got were very interesting. So I got the Eight of Pentacles upright, followed by the Empress reversed, followed by the Ten of Swords reversed. So Eight of Pentacles, right? Working hard, putting in the effort, getting the job done. Generally a very positive card. It's about workmanship, mastering your craft, focus, dedication, hard work, skills development, commitment, and expertise. Okay, so for many of us, this can be about something that we already know we're working on, right? That Saturn transit has already kind of been felt in recent months. So it can be talking about working hard where Saturn is, and knowing that we're trying to kind of like perfect that area of our life. Eights are always about change and transformation and some sense of exchange. So something that has to be put into it to get something out of it. The second card that I got was the Empress reversed, okay, which can be a more challenging card because it can be saying, are you doing the work but lacking the connection, lacking the emotion, lacking the love, the nurturing. This can also be about creative blocks. And I do think that there can be some sense of mentally feeling a little bit blocked, knowing what we want, visualizing it. We have our goals in mind, but we're just like, how is that possible? So the Empress reverse can talk about creative blocks, but also being overly dependent on other people, having a scarcity mindset, lack of growth, uncaring, insecurity, overbearing, negligent, and smothering. So there can be a sense of being like, you know, too overly dependent or not paying enough attention. I think this can also be about realizing that we're working on things, but our hearts may not necessarily be in it. And then the final card that I got here was the Ten of Swords reversed, which if you're going to pull the Ten of Swords, that's probably a better way to pull it. And that was representing recovery, regeneration, moving on even stronger, lessons learned, survival, painful swords falling out, and healing. But I think it could be some painful words, some ideas. Tens are about completions. So it looks to me like if there's something that needs to be said or something that needs to get out, now is the time to kind of work that out. Journaling, you know, creative writing, this can be really helpful because we have a square from Gemini to like a Neptunian sign. Now later down the road, we're going to see at the tail end of Gemini season, the sun will come into a square with Neptune as well. And so that's going to represent that softening, that releasing, that sacrifice, that's letting go. But right now there can be a sense of like kind of bumping up against some of these challenging conversations and these harsh words and criticisms that possibly need to come out, especially if it's something that's like taking space in our mental bodies and like inhibiting us from being able to kind of speak out and feel you know, more in alignment with our higher self. Anyway, just wanted to give you guys some words of encouragement as you come upon this transit over the next couple of days. Once again, as a reminder, it's gonna be specifically between the 26th and the 28th of May, but you guys might be feeling this over the next couple of days. I will be back on Thursday. We're going to have horoscopes that are coming out for the month of June. And I'm also going to be getting you guys ready for this Jupiter North Node conjunction because it's going to be very magical and very beneficial for everyone. Let me know, how are you feeling with these transits? Were you born with Sun square Saturn? Have you just recently undergone a Saturn square your Sun transit? Are you one of my mutable signs who's feeling the heat? I'd love to hear from you guys. Please leave me your comments below. And don't forget to click the button and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll be back on Thursday, and you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.